Hi, it's Val Girling again, and I'd like to do another talk about running a book group and to give you some ideas of what to read, what's been successful in my book group. And the theme I've chosen today is about science fiction. Now, as a genre, it is an absolutely huge, huge area. And we found that when we decided to do science fiction, we couldn't possibly say, oh, let's all read a different science fiction book because there are far too many to choose from. And in a discussion afterwards, the differences between them will be far too di- uh, disparate to be able to actually compare and contrast them and ask questions and keep the conversation going in a meaningful way. So I've divided it into different themes within science fiction. And as such, I am going to have to keep looking at my notes because I do have names of books and authors and films for you to actually look up and research and perhaps use for yourself. But these have been successful and I want to recommend them to you. So, as a science fiction section, genre, huge genre, we could look at the idea of classic science fiction. And one interesting aspect of classic science fiction is that we have, if we go back to when the first science fiction books were written, by people like H.G. Wells and Isaac Asimov shortly after that. No, H.G. Wells was before that. But what we have then is we can actually then contrast what they thought then would be the future to what has been actually come to pass as the future. So that is quite an interesting aspect. So, for example, you could just decide to read different books by H.G. Wells. However, we've got you could compare a book by H.G. Wells with a book written in a slightly more modern time. Uh, so that you can compare and contrast, and so you could have The First Men on the Moon by H.G. Wells compared with another book about going to the moon. We've got another author, Isaac Asimov, was also an early science fiction writer when this genre was first created or called science fiction, certainly. And he wrote I, Robot in 1950. And the film with Will Smith in it was filmed in 2004, came out in 2004, and certainly one could read I, Robot by Isaac Asimov and watch the film. Another interesting one another classic writer, Ray Bradbury, written several science fiction books, and one that I particularly like is The Martian Chronicles, written in 1950. And a very interesting conversation could ensue if you compared it with The Martian, written by Andy Weir in 2014 and made into a film in 2015. And again, a very interesting conversation could be comparing the early book written by Ray Bradbury, which is absolutely fantastic and I absolutely love it, and compare it with what has been perceived as the reality of going to Mars in 2014. Again, we have another classic writer, Ursula Le Guin, has written several novels classified as science fiction, and The Left Hand of Darkness was in its time in 1969 a groundbreaking novel, and she's written several other books. John Wyndham is a similar well-known classical of the genre of sci-fi. He wrote loads and loads of books, but a couple that we might pick on particularly might be Midwich Cuckoos, made into a film quite a long time ago. I can't remember what year, but it was The Village of the Damned, Midwich Cuckoos, and The Day of the Triffids, another book by him, which was made into a film, and I think has been made into even a more modern film. So there might be a couple of versions of that out there. Frank Herbert is another one who has written fantastic sci-fi novels from way back. Dune is the one that one might think of straight away now, because that is a book that was written a long time ago, but made into a film. I would think the first film in the 1970s, maybe 80s, and now, of course, it's just been made into a new film just come out. And that could be a very interesting conversation comparing all of those. And the last one that I want to touch on, because again, it is such a large area, is this idea of looking at a dystopian future. And there are, again, lots of novels set in this various ideas of the dystopian future. And I would think of, for example, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. We've got the Mad Adam trilogy by Margaret Atwood, which features Oryx and Crake, The Year of the Flood, and Mad Adam, which are fantastic, absolutely fantastic books, looking at different the same situation from different angles. And it would be possible. I haven't tried it yet, but I have thought about actually asking people to read different views of the story, and that would actually make a really interesting discussion. If you've got they've seen from different viewpoints, but it's the same situation that she's writing about, and more or less anyway, and it would be a very interesting discussion. And the last one I decided I'd mentioned too many things, was to mention Ian McEwan. And I have to say that I find his writing, of which, I mean, he is quite difficult to read. I find him very difficult, because I think that he writes so fantastically imaginatively that you have to work very hard to imagine it. But he's obviously a very brilliant writer, and I really enjoyed The Player of Games. I found it very inspirational, and gives you lots and lots to think about. So what I encourage you to do then is to think about this whole area of science fiction. And obviously, over the years, it has meant different things. Science fiction, as the view of the future, has been, and of course aliens and other planets, has changed drastically as we have, as a planet, found out more about the moon for a start, more about how gravity happens. And in fact, I recently read Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis, and he wrote the trilogy there of the Out of the Silent Planet, Perelandra, and That Hidden Strength. And his view of how they could have a rocket in the back garden and actually have a whole sideboards and things in the rocket, not even really bothering about the whole idea of gravity and how they get to another planet. And I think actually that might even be Mars that he gets to. That is fantastic. Out of the Silent Planet. We Earth are known as the Silent Planet. And he travels out from this lovely rocket in his back garden, and it's seeing this really different view that I think is really, really fun. And I just absolutely adore reading books that are set then, and they think they're being so avant-garde. And of course, they were at the time, but of course, as we know now, completely, misguided, really, I suppose. But anyway, I hope that you can find something in there to entertain and amuse you, and possibly even inform you. I find it sometimes very hard to realise that we actually don't really have any evidence about aliens and things like this, and yet I'm only too willing to believe in all that stuff. But then again, I have a great imagination, and As you know, I'm writing my books for children, traveling to lots and lots of imaginary planets that I've made up, and really enjoying myself. So, reading all these books about science fiction has at least germinated some fresh ideas for myself. And who knows, maybe you might start writing as well. Okay, well, happy reading, happy watching, and happy talking. I'll see you again. Okay, bye.